as it turns out, it's a little bit more complex than that. And that's why we have our guest today. Allow me to introduce Mike Thornton, who is the general manager for the past 23 plus years at the San Elijo Water Campus to educate us a little bit how it works and what your system is doing.
Well, I'll just kind of give you a rough layout of this depiction here. Of basically, there's a lot of pipes and infrastructure in our streets below ground. And so actually, a street is a public good. And so there's corridors where everybody can have their pipes. So there's a spot for your water pipe, there's a spot for the sewer pipe, there's a spot for the stormwater pipe, there's another spot for your telecommunications and for SDG&E. And so those roads are really busy. And we try to archive accurately, because when we don't, we run into those things when we're doing construction, and it gets quite expensive, not just in the interruption of service, but also whose fault is that? And so archiving is really important and also timely and expensive. So good on you guys for doing that archiving work. And that archiving is going everywhere. And so we're doing the same thing with mapping all of these utilities from all these different private or public enterprises. Again, for the foundation of civilization, for our cities, for our communities. So you want to hop into my PowerPoint?
Yeah, do you talk, I don't know if you talk about it, but are the stormwater and the sewer water, are they the same system?
Yeah, great question. So on the East Coast, they experimented with that because the view was pretty simple. Sewer water and stormwater are a nuisance, and we want them away. But what we found is sewer water is a substantially less volume than stormwater. And if you try to put those in the same pipes, they cause an overflow. And then what you're doing is you're overflowing sewage in your streets, which is much more dangerous, much more odorous and problematic to the environment than stormwater. So as civilization moved from east to west on the United States, we elected in the West to not have those, so we have a separate system on the West Coast, and the East Coast is trying to separate those two. There are some spots on the West Coast that do have combined sewer systems, like the city of San Francisco, and that's created tremendous challenges for the city, and they're trying to do these giant detention basins under the city to help manage what we call sanitary sewer overflows. Generally speaking, we keep the stormwater and the wastewater separate, just because of the challenges that we can experience when it rains and pours. There's just too much water for our sewer pipes. And there's the whole art to sizing sewer pipes. I'll touch on that for a second. When you build a sewer pipe, you want the flow in that pipe to go greater than 2 feet per second. At 2 feet per second or less, solids will fall out of a suspension, and it requires 3 feet per second or more to resuspend them. And so we want to keep the solids in suspension to go from point A to point Z, which would be the treatment plant. Here's some great photos of the Cardiff area. This is the San Elijo Lagoon, Solana Beach, Cardiff. I believe this is maybe circa 1937-ish, and this is a little bit later, but before 1950s. The absence of the 5 freeway, the absence of homes beyond kind of the Cardiff area. And so at that time, the community would treat wastewater as a private owner's responsibility. And so when it was an advanced community, you could have a outhouse with a septic system, and the earth has a capacity to treat waste. And so we call it soil aquifer treatment. And so there is a natural capacity to treat waste through the soil, or you can have a septic system, which is just tanks, that each tank allows the biology to break down the organic material on its own natural scale, and then it goes out to a leach field, and that's where the water will kind of get absorbed back into the soil. but there's a carrying capacity of the soil. And so if you overload that, you'll create a public health nuisance. And so that's a reason why there was a point where we had to evolve into a municipal system. There is also, and people have done this for hundreds of years, we love using moving water as a way to get rid of our waste. It's like, there it goes, bye. In society, what we've done is we grab water upstream and we take our wastewater downstream, and then that poor city downstream has to do the same thing. I think you can only imagine like the Mississippi River. So there was, it's kind of a process, the human process of us learning and then adjusting our behaviors. A lot of what we do, from incinerating trash to taking our waste and putting it into a septic system or into a body of water, we did that because it was convenient, because it was low cost. It was basically just what required the least amount of energy input. But that has a limit. And so as our communities developed up, the carrying capacity of the soil, of the land, gets tipped when we build our cities. And that's why we need these infrastructure. Next slide. I can do that too. There it is. So this is the first treatment plant in Cardiff. It was built in 1957. Very simple treatment plant. This is where the nature reserve parking lot is. This was in that little parking lot. The freeway would be behind us over here, actually on the other side of that little hill. And then real basic treatment system. They would take the solid, wastewater treatment is a real basic process of separating solids from liquids. And they put the solids in that tank, and that tank will decompose the material, typically without oxygen, so it's anaerobic digestion. And after about 20 or 30 days, that's a much safer, lower odor kind of manure that you could use for crop fertilizer, right? And then the water would go into ponds, and so you would screen it to get the sticks and the rocks and that kind of product out. And then we put the waste in ponds, and they're called facultative ponds. And the sunlight helps do a little bit of a treatment, and the top of the pond gets air, and the bottom of the pond gets no air. And it's a real simple treatment process, often used in areas that are very rural and very poor, and that have very low populations, because those ponds don't have a great allowance for variance in toxicity and flow.
And they smell.
And they smell. Putting him in a lagoon, with a lagoon that can go up and down in water level with storms, not a good idea. And so they quickly found out that this wasn't great. And then also, as they connected sewer pipes to it, the carrying capacity of that system got completely utilized, and within 5 years. And so this is a report, and this, thank you for the invitation to come here. And I've been with San Elijo for 25 years. I know a bit of history, but this gave me an opportunity to really dig in back a little bit more. And so I was able to learn some information that I didn't know. And there's a gentleman, Michael Hogan, who is he serves as the board president of the Santa Fe Irrigation District. He actually worked at the San Elijo Water Pollution Control Facility, that's the facility on Manchester, in 1969. And his father was instrumental in forming the Solana Beach Sanitation District in the 40s, and he found some documents. So what I'm going to copy, and then I'm going to turn them over to you guys so you guys can have them. But they're these great documents. And so here's a letter from a public works director to the board of supervisors. That was the county board of supervisors who's responsible for all these incorporated areas. Again, dated 1962, basically saying, hey, we're having problems with sanitation in these areas of the county that are growing. We're seeing population increases, and we're seeing that the current systems that are there are becoming public nuisance. Odors, flies, and at that point, they didn't have quite the attention of detail to the human impacts that we're now more aware of. for untreated waste. And so this was a galvanizing moment for the county to take action. From that action, they took the treatment plant that was in the lagoon, which was Cardiff's, and again, Solana Beach had a very similar one that was in the lagoon also. They took those out of the lagoon, or basically stopped using them, and they built a treatment plant where the San Elijo facility is today. Again, you can see the freeway here. This is circa 1983, a very simple treatment plant. We call it primary treatment, where you just have some physical screens to take out, again, trash, rubbish. Now in the 80s, we're using plastic stuff, so all the plastic things that go get flushed down, they don't break down. We remove those in the front of the treatment plant, so it would be more of a biological treatment after that. Very simple treatment. Basically, you put them in some large pools, things that float, you come to the top, oils, fats, grease, you skim that off. The things that settle to the bottom, you skim that off, you put it into the digesters over here. They then digest for somewhere between 20 to 30 days. That fertilizer, that biosolids is then put in the back here on the ground. The water kind of percolates off it, the sun dries it out a little bit, and then they haul it off to some farm.
In Arizona.
Yes, so it's really interesting. The biosolids in basically from South Orange County all the way to the border, those biosolids typically go to Arizona. And then from North Orange County up, those biosolids typically go to Central Valley. And it's purely a trucking hauling cost. And then those go to farms, which charge you to take it away, and then they use it as a fertilizer for non-human consumption crops. Then that's a common practice that we still do today.
What's an example crop?
Sudan grass, alfalfa, things like that for livestock.
May I ask you, in that picture, when were all of the solar panels installed?
Those were installed in 2022.
Huh?
As part of that treatment plant, we stopped discharging into the lagoon and we started discharging through an ocean outfall. This is a more modern picture of that. At that time, the original outfall went into the ocean about 4,000 feet. So a mile is 5,280 feet, so almost a mile out. And we would go through, again, simple primary treatment and then discharge it out to the ocean far enough that you'd hope the currents and the wind wouldn't bring that back into the recreational points on the coast.
Are the coastlines continually tested for bacteria?
They are.
In
And
case it doesn't flow the way you want it.
yeah, it's just 3 years ago, we did a really detailed study. So there's 5 ocean outfalls in San Diego County, and we analyzed the outfalls because the question was posed: when you discharge something from one body to another body, if they're different in terms of makeup, temperature, salinity, they can stay as a bubble, so it doesn't homogenize into the system. And so the question that was asked by the regulatory agency, which is called the Regional Water Quality Control Board, they asked, what if at the end of your pipe there's a plume? And what if your plume combined with a plume in Carlsbad? And so we studied that. And very technical work. We had basically water submersible drones in the ocean that took the temperature of the water through the whole water column. And at the end of our outfall, it's about 150 feet deep. We would take the temperature, and these drones would go back and forth, so we'd have a grid on the X and Y axis, but also vertically too. We analyzed for organic compounds, we analyzed for salinity to see, and what we found was there is no plumes associated with this, but the lagoon, when it changes with the tides, creates a massive plume. And so that's really interesting to know. And not to sidetrack too much, but that's why it's really important that we don't pollute stormwater, because that typically doesn't get treatment. It goes into like a water body like a lagoon, and then that gets flushed out into the ocean.
And the SCDO partnership?
So in 1974, the city of Escondido, which has their own treatment plant, which is called the HARF, Hale Avenue Resource Recovery Facility, which has a capacity of about 18 million gallons a day of treatment. They were discharging at that time just straight into the Escondido Creek that then comes down into the San Elijo Lagoon. And so they, in 1974, partnered with us. They built a pipeline from Escondido all the way to our facility right off Manchester, and then we co-own a outfall, and we extended that out another 4,000 feet. So now it's a total of 8,000 feet, so about a mile and a half out into the ocean, discharging in an average water depth of 150 feet. We inspect this outfall every 2 years. We inspect what goes into that outfall every day. And every month I have to sign a report that says that I will go to jail if I lie.
You're still here.
I'm still here. So it's a lot like golf where you should be honest on your score, but there's consequences if you're not.
What happens out in the ocean with all of those outfalls?
So what happens with the flow?
When it goes to the ocean, what happens in the ocean?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know what happens is we get a vibrant ecosystem because there still is a little bit of nutrient that's going out there, which drives a little bit of the photoplankton, which then drives the little fish, which drives the big fish. I think it was pre-pandemic, so right? I only know the world was like before and after the pandemic, but I think it was around 2015, the state of California made that a marine reserve. And what we're seeing around the outfall, keep this to yourself, flourishing of lobsters. There are so many lobsters around our outfall. We're nervous that there's little rocks that hold that outfall in place, and they move them to make a little hole. And it is tremendously expensive to put rocks back around that. The level of permits that we have to get, and it's really interesting. There's only 2 spots in California that produce the type of rock that we need to go around the outfall, because we want very dense rock, so they're very heavy and they want to stay in place. Last time we called it a reballasting work. The last time we did this was in 2005, and so far that effort has really held the test of time.
Yeah, we just redid the lagoon outfall. What is your time frame as far as, everything's growing, Escondido's growing. When I found out that Escondido was pumping into our system, I was like, what, really? I mean, that's a whole nother huge city.
Right.
So what's the estimate as far as when the outfall will be obsolete, or
That's a great question.
handle everything?
Those are the kind of things I have to think about. So we just replaced, 2017, we replaced the portion of outfall that goes from in front of our facility on Manchester, right there at the Nature Center parking lot. From there all the way to the beach, we replaced that section of the pipe. That was built asbestos concrete pipe, real popular type of construction pipe in the 70s. Again, viewed in the 70s, like this was kind of state of the art. What we realized is in the environment through the lagoon, which is a brackish water condition with varying tides, that can be very corrosive to that type of pipe. And so at 50 years, we felt we should replace that pipe before it fails. And so we replaced that pipe from, again, our front door all the way to the beach. The connection point at the beach was at 35 feet deep, which actually Phelon's Construction did that project for us. So just imagine building a hole on the beach. You know how when you dig a hole like, I don't know, a foot deep, it just wants to fill it with water? 35 feet deep. So the water from the lagoon was trying to go into that hole, the water from the beach was trying to go into that hole. We had to constantly pump the water out, or we dug the hole to access where the ocean pipe connected, which was a different type of material. That material was fine, and we replaced it with something called high-density polyethylene pipe. It's that big, black, thick, rubber-looking pipe. And when they originally built this, again, this was back in the day when you could almost do anything environmentally, they just put the equipment in the lagoon, dug a trench, put the pipe in, and there it was. So our pipe goes 70 feet deep, and it goes well under the railroad tracks. There's also a 12-inch high-pressure gas line that goes through that corridor also. We went way deep underneath that, and then came back up elevation and connected to the outfall pipe. We believe that this pipe will last another 50 years, and so that would be replaced, probably in the time frame of 2070. In terms of capacity, the really interesting thing is our flows are actually going down because of water conservation inside the homes.
You mentioned with this old pipe that you replaced asbestos.
Yeah, asbestos concrete pipe.
Was that not dangerous because of that asbestos?
It's unknown.
So it's a great question. Asbestos is an amazing material. It has a lot of great properties, and it's really good in terms of not absorbing heat, like not transferring heat. The problem with asbestos is when it gets friable. When it gets powderish and you inhale that, you'll get cancer. And that's a great example, and I'm an engineer, and I try to stay humble to go, we know what we know, but there's a history, right? That's what we're here for, our history. There's a history of things that we've learned where we thought something was amazing, and then we learned that there's some unintentional consequence that now we know better of.
Mesothelioma.
Yes. What's that?
Mesothelioma.
Yeah, exactly. That's the cancer. Yeah, that's a cancer you get from friable asbestos. 5 minutes. Okay, so then we talked a little bit about improving treatment. So it was very basic treatment in the 80s. The Clean Water Act that was passed in 1972. Generally, when they do massive regulatory improvements, they give decades so that you have a ramp-up time to implement those. The San Elijo, at that time it was called the San Elijo Water Pollution Control Facility. That facility didn't meet the Clean Water Act requirements, and it was upgraded in 1990 to 91 was pretty much the upgrade period where we added biological treatment. So now we use biology in a much more intentional manner to treat the wastewater. What it does is it's more effective in removing a variety of contaminants, removing organic material. It makes the water more easily recycled, and it also helps produce a water quality effluent that's much cleaner and safer.
That's secondary treatment?
That would be called secondary treatment, exactly. That was driven by the Clean Water Act of 1972, and then required really by 1990.
Are you still using algae as a part of the treatment?
No. I gotta be tighter on my answers. So by using the biology system, we're much more conscientious of what that biological flock looks like in our bioreactors. These are called stock ciliates. That's a really good example of healthy bacteria in our treatment plants. We will, in these bioreactors, which are called aeration basins, we will cultivate the right type of bacteria to do the treatment for us. So very scientific, and kind of like a good community has good diversity in it. That's the same thing with wastewater treatment. We want a diverse biological population to do the type of treatments that we're looking for. That set us up into the position, again, because that was much better water quality, to go into water recycling. The community of Encinitas was very forward-looking, and in 1982 passed Proposition M. This was a Cardiff-centric proposition, creating $1,000 for every sewer connection to then be seed funding for a reclamation facility here at our site. Solana Beach also did a similar measure, and that was the seed funding for the recycled water facility that was built, designed in the 90s, permitted, funded, and then constructed right in the 98 to 2000 when it became operational.
And that reduced outfall flow?
Substantially. In the summer, we will at times have no flow going out the outfall.
Watering golf courses?
Watering golf courses, parks, Caltrans, a variety, cooling towers, a variety of different uses. Also, interesting to our partnership with Escondido, in 2003, I brokered a deal with Escondido where we can skim off of their outfall. So we can take the water from them because we knew there'd be a time, potentially, where we would recycle more than what we had.
Nice.
Building on recycling, one of the things we realized that as a coastal community, you'll get inflow from the groundwater basin into our sewer system. Sometimes it's referred to I&I, inflow and infiltration. And that water's salty. Also, as you know, our community has hard water, and so people will use water softeners. Water softeners can be softened with salt. That also dries up the salinity in our wastewater, and the typical treatment process does not remove salinity. So we added advanced treatment, microfiltration, reverse osmosis, for a part of our recycled water. The other part gets sand filtration. We combine those up, we hit it with sodium hydrochloride, which is bleach, which is a safer form of chlorine, to disinfect and produce the recycled water. That makes the recycled water more usable for a variety of different plant types, expanding our marketing.
Little known factoid, the patent holder, one of the patent holders, inventor of reverse osmosis was a gentleman named John Quirk, who lived here in Cardiff
Wow.
back in the day.